it's a foremost grounding of our coaching practice that everyone possesses unprocessed trauma wounding from childhood. Every single one of us on the planet. So how do we begin to identify that? Well, that's what we help men, women, and couples do. And so what we help men, women, and couples first is to identify those original wounds that now come forward in adulthood as triggers. The reality is we can't fix you, but we can begin to identify where the original wound came from. So healing in and of itself is a feminine energy, which can be really confusing to men. And that's why it's harder and it's not instinctual for men to heal, for men to feel. We're often shamed in that space. Oh, no, I don't need to feel. Rub some dirt in it, get over it. Time heals all wounds, which is a myth. I was trying to save women in my life by being nice and kind and generous and passive and indecisive and allowing them to do what they needed to do. The reason why we feel folks are attracted to our modalities, attracted to our coaching practice, attracted to us is because we're living and breathing it as a man, as a woman, individually, and as a married couple. We help men find purpose and help women feel peace.
The following podcast is for educational purposes and covers matters of masculinity, femininity, trauma, love, and relationships. You may come away from it with a profound new perspective on yourself or on your relationships of past or present. Buckle up, let's go. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Health King's Court, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Health. I'm your host, Zach the Health King, and I have a very interesting guest with me today. He is the founder and CEO of Daring Deeply Life Coaching. Together, he and his wife help men, women, and couples find deep freedom, healing, and transformation from past emotional pain and trauma. With 30 plus years of experience in relationships, wellness, and communication, he brings empowered awareness and true emotional healing to his clients to break negative patterns and realize real, extraordinary, life-changing relationships. And that is David Lea. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Zach. Great to be here.
Thank you. I'm very happy to have you here because this is an essential topic, right? None of us would be here today if it wasn't for, at one point in time, a man and a woman existing at least a bit harmoniously to, make it happen. So yeah. We're talking about a really important topic, and it's something that I think a lot of people can use some advice and some help in. But firstly, let's qualify ourselves a bit. What brought you to this area of work, and what makes you someone that people should even listen to in the first place?
It's a great question. I often, Zach, I'm reminded that there are so many individuals out there espousing opinions, thoughts, and ideas, and all that. And I completely honor and respect what everybody. And we live in a culture and a time when everybody has access to everybody. We have access to everybody at all time. So in a social media world and in a cyber world. And so it makes sense to say, hey, why should I listen to this individual? First of all, you have absolutely every one of your prerogatives not to listen to me. So which may sound really unusual. Why is this guy saying don't listen to me? Well, the reality is I want everyone to remain curious before critical, which is actually one of our tenets of our coaching practice, remain curious before critical. Imagine if the whole world remained curious before critical, how the world would look much, much differently. So when someone comes into our ecosystem, when someone jumps onto our social media channels and they begin to watch and listen to content, and they come back with a disparaging comment or perhaps even something adversarial, I simply respond with, hey, I appreciate your opinion. Welcome to the conversation. And I would love to hear more. And oftentimes I will honestly say, I don't hear anything back, but I'm always open to the conversation. And I'm also, when we're working with individuals who are in the dating space, who have yet to be in a marriage or a committed relationship, or maybe they're back in the dating space, one of the tenets that we teach them is date to learn, not to love. Date to learn, not to love. Meaning, hey, when you come into our ecosystem, when you come onto our social media channels, date us, stalk us, creep us, please. Come and find out if we resonate, if we are aligned with our messaging. So that's what I will say first is often people will come and not align with what we're teaching and coaching, and that's okay. There are plenty of influencers and impact leaders out in the world who can serve them better. And so we have that thought at the top of all of our teachings and coachings, and when we're out in the public, is hey, take a listen to us. If it feels like it's aligned, fantastic. If not, I promise there are other individuals that can better serve you. Now, all that to say, why do my wife and I engage in helping people understand, identify, and validate their trauma wounding? Is because that's our story. So we have taken our pain and turned it into purpose, which is a phenomenal purpose-filled directive for anyone. Is wow, this is what I've experienced, and now I'm going to turn that into a purpose. I'm going to turn that into a career. I'm going to try to figure out a way to monetize something into a business, and that's essentially what we've done. So my wife and I, Paige Lee is her name. Go follow her on social media. We have our own unique trauma histories, and we come from an understanding, and it's a foremost grounding of our coaching practice that everyone possesses unprocessed trauma wounding from childhood. Every single one of us on the planet. So how do we begin to identify that? Well, that's what we help men, women, and couples do. So we've really come from our own lines of pain, from our own experiences of trauma in childhood, and how we've navigated through adulthood, trying to figure out this thing called life, trying to figure out this thing called relationships. And what we've also identified is that every single relationship complexity and challenge, that every single man, woman, doesn't matter how you identify, it all is rooted in unprocessed trauma. So why do we have problems in relationships? It's unprocessed trauma. It's not because we need to communicate better or have better sex or make more money or have more kids or invest more in a 401k. No, it's because we have unprocessed trauma wounding still resonating in our nervous system. So where do we come from? We come from the front lines of our own journey. And so we began to open ourselves up individually first, and then as a couple, now we help men, women, and couples in this space. So we have been mentored and coached and trained by some of the foremost minds in the trauma space on the planet, and those in the polarity space as well, masculine and feminine energy. And so we bring all of those teachings and learnings, coachings, and therapy sessions that we've all engaged in, and forth to help our clients begin to engage in that healing process themselves.
Love it. That's beautiful, and it's real, and it's where a lot of authenticity comes from, because what you said is so important in that, hey, this is your message. This is how you're formulating your thoughts and what you think might be worth considering, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution or prescription for everyone to follow. And so if it's not for you, then okay, so long, see you later. Please. It's that's super real. And in regards to having lived by what you're kind of talking about, that's super real too, because it does take someone working on themselves really at a true, deep, and meaningful level to ever think that they can start walking others through the process of themselves. And so would you like to touch upon what that kind of looked like for you at a personal level? What perhaps unprocessed trauma or trauma that originally was unprocessed did you then process? Why did that get instilled in you? And what were the ramifications of that? And how did those play out? And then how did you work to heal those? Kind of a multi.
Yeah. It's a fantastic question. So what we've come to understand is that we, as individuals, as adults, are not broken. We're not effed up. We're not hot messes. And we're not forever cursed by trauma. Rather, there are parts of us that have been traumatized, rather than the full integrated self as we identify. So we leverage a great deal of modalities in our healing practice. One primary modality is what is called internal family systems, IFS. So Dr. Richard Schwartz developed IFS, or internal family systems therapy, in the 1980s, when he began to identify within his psychiatric patients that they would just simply say, there's a part of me that feels this. There's a part of me that feels that. We often use that language. Everyone uses that language. There's a part of me that doesn't want to go to that party. There's a part of me that doesn't want to be with her anymore. There's a part of me that doesn't like my kid right now. Right? There's a part of me that this and a part of me that. Well, what he recognized was, rather than diagnosing that as multiple personality disorder, which has been in the ancient tomes of psychiatric work, rather he noticed, there's parts of them that come forward and that feel wounded, that get angry, that exhibit depression, sadness, grief. But yet there's a part of them, there's the self of them that is the compassionate and creative and encouraging and courageous and calm and connected individual. And so we have these parts that are dysregulated that trigger in adulthood in the form of somatic expression, anger and rage, right? The frustration we have with ourselves and with others. And what he recognized was, it's actually the parts of them that need attention. And so what we help men, women, and couples first is to identify those original wounds that now come forward in adulthood as triggers. And they're the younger child of us. It's the smaller, more vulnerable, more susceptible younger child that still thinks that the individual is 7 or 12 or 5 or 17. What we've come to understand is that trauma happens in childhood, that we are not traumatized as adults. That's a myth. So if we experience something of overwhelm in adulthood, it's simply an echo of what is still unprocessed from childhood. So folks will say, well, no. I didn't have any trauma until I met my ex-husband. and he gave me plenty of trauma. And I will respond very generously and very lovingly and say, consider this, that the wounds from your childhood went left unprocessed and unhealed, led you to make a choice to choose that particular man.
Yeah.
So it is the echoes of our unprocessed, and that's why we have to focus, specifically in our practice, on the original root causes, what we refer to and what Dr. Richard Schwartz refers to as the original incident, or OI. Now, what's also important is we also quote from Peter Levine, who is a trauma expert in this space, who says it's not trauma that happens to you. It's the fact that it was left unprocessed. It wasn't allowed to exit the body in a meaningful way from a caregiver, a loving adult in childhood. And so then it remains stuck inside the body and recirculates in the nervous system. And that's what produces the triggers in adulthood. So when coming to understand all of this, it made sense to me, it made sense to my wife, and we began to do our own work, and we're still doing, and we will forever be doing our own work, where we began to identify the parts of us that first were introduced to that traumatic moment and begin to work on that particular OI. So what often happens when people come to us is they say, hey, can you come fix my marriage? Can you help me fix me? Can you help me realize why I continue to choose the wrong man or the wrong woman? The reality is we can't. We can't fix you, but we can begin to identify where the original wound came from. And so we do that through a series of process and over a period of time, because this is not a light switch type of coaching. This is a dimmer switch, as my wife so beautifully says. It takes place over a vast amount of time and is necessary. In fact, healing in and of itself is what we refer to as a feminine energy. Healing is a feminine energy. Notice I said feminine energy, not female. So we all possess masculine and feminine energy within us. And that's a lens in which we work with our clients to help them heal their trauma. So healing in and of itself is a feminine energy, which can be really confusing to men. And that's why it's harder and it's not instinctual for men to heal, for men to feel. We're often shamed in that space. Oh, no, I don't need to feel. Rub some dirt in it, get over it. Time heals all wounds, which is a myth. And so why that's more tense and more difficult for a man to begin the healing process. But once a man begins to understand, oh, I need to identify where my wounds came from in childhood, I can begin that healing process together. So we work with couples. We say we work with couples, but we work with couples individually. We do not work with them together. We work with them independently. And it's really powerfully efficient and effective because we're working on the individual, as opposed to bringing two complex trauma histories into the same room and try to figure that one out. That's why we believe that individual healing is the best path.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that last point, and certainly with a large majority of everything that you've been saying, at the least. It's certainly difficult to, if not impossible, to just heal a relationship without actually healing two individuals. And for that to occur simultaneously even is difficult, right? Because you just have two circuses you're trying to attend at the same time. And it's certainly difficult. But I would love for people to be able to relate to you in a way. And I'd love to know what kind of core origin wounds you
Mhm.
identified in yourself,
Sure.
because
Yeah.
that brought you to the here and now, and it's
Hmm.
an interesting thing to explore if you're willing to share.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What I identified throughout my adulthood was that I was living in what we refer to as my wounded feminine energy. A man living in his wounded feminine energy. Now, what does feminine energy mean? It means such elements and behaviors as passivity, as addicted to love, as people pleasing, as codependency, as the nice guy. And so I lived in that space for 30 plus years of my adulthood. And so therefore, then I, according to the law of polarity, attracted more wounded masculine women. And we identify that as a misaligned or inverted polarity relationship. It never felt right throughout my life. It just was, and I didn't know any different. Well, what I came to realize through my own work was that there was a reason, there was a root cause of why I chose to be in my wounded feminine rather than identifying in my healing masculine energy, and why I chose to be more passive in my life. I have been absolutely a passive man throughout most of my life up until the last couple of years, allowing others to make choices for me, being a people pleaser, being addicted to this idea of love and companionship, and allowing others to choose because I thought, oh, well, that's just nice. I'm going to let everybody else decide and I will follow along and be the nice guy. Yeah, exactly. So, where did that come from? Well, it came from a wound within me as a child. When it began was when I lost my mother when I was just 2 weeks old. So out of complications of birth, tragedy, awful, we lost her in the hospital. I never knew my mother. What I didn't realize until much later was that the reason why I was drifting into passivity, the reason why I was drifting into wounded feminine energy, was into a misaligned attempt to save my mother. And so in order to save her, I was trying to save women in my life by being nice and kind and generous and passive and indecisive and allowing them to do what they needed to do. And I thought, oh, that's what I need to be because I want to be what they need me to be in order for me to feel wanted and desired is for them to feel safe. I thought, oh, that's how they will feel safe. So they won't be hurt again. So, but what I came to understand was, wow, I have been spending my entire adult life trying to save my mother, which was never going to happen. So until I realized that, oh, wow, that is a primary wound. And there are many, many others. So I then grew up with a father who subsequently invited other women into our life. And so I saw this more passivity through my father being an undevoted individual, which is a serious feminine wound that a lot of men carry. So a man who juggles multiple women is in his wounded feminine energy because he is not devoted unto one, which is interesting because people in the dating space will say, well, wait a minute. I thought how am I supposed to know? I have to, meet several people at the same time and test them out. And what I will say is commit to one woman at a time. And if you feel, hey, after one date, great, move on. But do not lend yourself into a lack of devotion, which is wounded feminine energy. That was another one of my wounds. Was I spent the vast majority of my adult life juggling women, even when I was committed to one. I always had my head on a swivel, searching for what could be next. That was my wound to a lack of devotion from what I witnessed as a child growing up with a father who was not devoted to himself or to women in general as well.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack in all of this. And thank you for being willing to share this because it's an important conversation and understanding the perspective of how we've come to form our conclusions or our current belief structure is it's certainly an interesting exploration. And so I think there's lots of things that happen and perhaps coincided and further inflicted the thought structures that got inflicted in yourself and alike several thousands, hundreds of thousands of men all the same in that as these kind of personal inner wounds are occurring, there's been societal pushes to glorify feminization within men and masculinization within women. And
Mm-hmm.
so, as internally you or other men have been experiencing things that kind of predispose them to becoming passive or becoming, woman pleasers, or so they think, people like that that's also kind of what's been propped up as what men should be doing societally and what's rewarded, and doing perhaps the opposite or anything other than that gets demonized as well. So it's kind of like we've been out here getting attacked from all angles, from within our own family units, and then from the media and societal pushes and structures and
Yeah.
behavioral manipulation at a larger scale as well. And so it's no surprise that we see relationships and society in general being in such a state of disarray and disharmony and absolute and utter chaos. And I would describe the average relationship these days as entirely inverted. Like you so succinctly described, there's wounded women out there that then form a protective masculine shell around them naturally. There's men out there that have been wounded and beat down to operate from a feminine frame for whatever reason, whether it's trauma in one way or another. And those two, because polarity does naturally seek itself, seek its counterpart out, end up together. And in my honest opinion, there is zero way for that to ever play out in anything other than chaos and disharmony. You can't come about a relationship, a union, in a state of inversion and ever expect it to work out. And this is why
Mm-hmm.
we see so much craziness, And you have such celebrated structures these days of women being masculine and in charge and this and that, when one, they don't really want that. They might think they want that. They don't really want that. And it's not good for them. And it's not good for the man. And it's not good for the women. It's not good for the children. It's not good for society. And it's
Mm-hmm.
so unfortunate the state that we see the average relationship in. Would you agree that on average, probably in most homes or relationships, at least in our American culture, the women are in charge, and that's to the detriment of pretty much everyone involved?
Yeah. It's certainly widespread. I will say that it is certainly widespread. In fact, it is. It's almost exclusive, 100%. The men who come to us for help, which I am currently working about 50-50, which is extraordinary. Extraordinary. It's usually about 10 to 15% men will seek healing, growth, and transformation. So I'm working with about 50% men, 50% women. Some of those are married couples. And every single man that comes to me may or may not know it in the moment, but we also take them through an initial, what we refer to as the masculine energy and healing assessment. It's an intake form in which they answer these 85 questions that really dive into their past, present, and what they want in their future to identify where those trauma wounds first came from. And so I have this information when we begin to work, but oftentimes they come to me and they say, I have no idea why my wife won't follow me. I have no idea why my wife is so angry all the time. I have no idea how to lead her. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do as a man. I have no idea what my purpose is. I don't even know who I am. And so these men are coming to me in their wounded feminine energy. The women who come to us, guess what energy they're in? They're in their wounded masculine energy, seeking a way to soften and surrender into their true essence as a woman and have no idea how to do so. And so these two individuals, as you said so poignantly, are attracted to one another. Now, what's interesting is the vast majority of those women who are in their wounded feminine energy and men who are in their wounded masculine energy will not be seeking help. because someone in their wounded masculine energy, a man in his wounded masculine energy, typically has it all figured out. He's not the problem. Someone else is the problem. He doesn't need work. Okay? That's his wounding. That is a wounded masculine perspective from a man. A wounded feminine woman is incredibly weak and meek and may be under the power and control of a wounded masculine man. So may not have the financial resources, may not have the time and energy, or even the safety and security to begin to seek help and understanding. So we are navigating, certainly in our coaching practice, a very distinct polarity, which is inverted, which is a man in his wounded feminine and a woman in her wounded masculine. So to answer your question, absolutely. The vast majority of people that we work with, the woman has come into the space owning, controlling, navigating, deciding her world, whether she is single or she is married. It typically does play out that she has been in charge. And of course, then she is attracting a man who doesn't want to be in charge or doesn't think he can be in charge. That all has the complex woundings underneath. And so when these individuals come to us, we begin to decipher, we begin to identify and validate where those wounds come from. So to answer your question, absolutely.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that's occurred in society where the men have failed as men. Subsequently, the women have not been allowed to be true to their inner women or womanhood or femininity. And as a man, I've come to comprehend that everything's our fault. We've allowed this to happen. Not we, perhaps me and you, but collectively, the men of society have allowed society to go down this road and left our women helpless. Because it takes us standing up for the proper dynamics for women to ever be able to stand a chance. Because to me, like I said, everything's men's fault. And women can only exist in the world that men create and shape and form. And as men have failed to show up as individuals and communities, societies, and in the family units, like I alluded to before, it's only natural for women to have to form that calloused outer masculine shell because femininity must be protected by something. It is inherently vulnerable. And so in your healing practices, do you find it perhaps difficult to work with women to heal their feminine if they don't have any semblance of healthy masculinity around them? How do they surrender to that experience in this scary and tough world? Are you seeing what I'm saying?
Absolutely, I do. Yeah, it's a great question. So what makes from our perspective, certainly, and from our clients' results, is we have a very unique perspective on when working with women and men, but to identify specifically in women who may or may not have, to your point, a healthy masculine frame as an example, either a partner, husband, wherever in life they lack the identification of healthy masculine. So what we learned early on was, so what happens? What happens to a single mother at age 40 or a woman in her 50s who was married for 25 years and decided to choose herself over a relationship that no longer served her? And now she's in the dating world as a 50-year-old woman who may not have any exposure to healthy masculine her whole life, from the fact of her childhood with fathers and uncles and brothers, all the way into the partner she chose who potentially lacked that masculine frame. So what do we do with these women? What we discovered is we help them heal both their masculine and their feminine energetic wounding. And what we would come to understand is that a woman does absolutely not need a man to heal her feminine and masculine wounds. Now, how in the world does that happen? Well, we first have to help her begin to anchor somewhere, somehow, her exposure to healthy masculine energy. And this has been 100%, it is undefeated so far in working with these women, is we help them identify somewhere, somehow, in their childhood, in their teenage years, in their young adult years, they have had exposure to a healthy masculine energy somewhere. Now, it might have been a stranger on the street that passed them by and was so incredibly masculine. And they recognize that through some of the somatic activities and exercises we take them through, meditation and journaling and whatnot, is they recall, oh my gosh, actually, I had lunch with a gentleman in my 20s, and he was so incredibly powerful and kind and generous and devoted and decisive and strong. Now, I never saw him again, but boy, did I feel that. And so what we do is we help women identify that anchoring, as we call it, and anchoring into masculine energy. Another activity we have new clients do, all of our women, is we have them write to their ideal masculine. We have them write a letter describing who their ideal masculine energy would be. And most often, they're speaking to their father that they never had.
Yeah.
So they're actually describing and creating, and it allows them, creating, how feminine. It's allowing them to create their ideal masculine father or masculine example. It's a powerful exercise. And they get to say, well, I need him to protect and to provide and to hold space and to love me through my emotions and to ensure that I'm safe and I'm secure, and their strength comes forward, and they're decisive and they're proactive and they're reliable and they're consistent and they're honest. And so she then crafts this beautiful, idyllic example of masculine energy with our help, because a lot of the time they'll come and say, I have no idea what even healthy masculine is. And so we help them, educate them on what some of those healthy masculine integrated energies can be. So this is how we begin to work with women, that they need to heal their inner masculine energy first. Then they can live a life if a man comes and finds them, and if they connect to a healing masculine man, or if they never do. Not the point. The point is they're healing as a whole soul without the codependency of a man. So often women will come into my social media circles and say, well, I don't have a boyfriend. I don't have a husband. I'm doing this all myself. How in the world am I supposed to heal? Oh, you can. We have a plethora of single, unattached, uncommitted women who come to us and go, oh, wow, I can heal my wounded masculine. I can heal my wounded feminine within me. And what's interesting about that is that allows them to bloom into this feminine energy that then begins to attract healthy masculine energy. So we have found a sweet spot in understanding no one needs anyone. Now, out of the other corner of my mouth, Zach, this is what I'll say. The most powerful, effective, and efficient healing that we've seen in individuals is when they are in a relationship, which is interesting because people will say, oh, I'm swearing off dudes. And men are like, I hate women. I ain't ever doing this. I got to heal first. I have to heal first, and then I'll get out there. And what we help them come to an understanding is you don't. You don't have to become healed, which, by the way, no one is healed. We are healing, and we'll continue to heal until the good Lord takes us home. So people will say, well, yeah, I need to heal. I got more and more and more. I have years before I'm going to get myself out there. And what we encourage them to say is, when you are in a relationship doing this work, you are out in the field practicing, falling down, standing up, falling down, standing up. I am more of a healed man because I'm married, not in spite of. Because now I get to integrate what I learn in my own individual healing journey and test it with my wife. And I will learn fairly quickly on whether or not that integration has taken place.
And that assumes, of course, that the counterpart is a willing participant in the growth and being able to be dynamic and kind of change and react as well. And of course, that takes the initial person to comprehend that things aren't like light switches where you can just say, hey, I'm better now, so now you need to react to the way I'm being now. You know, things are, of course, a little more nuanced than that. And
absolutely,
we have to understand that partners are their own living, breathing humans as well. And so
exactly.
they're not necessarily just going to get with the picture, especially if they don't know what you're up to or what new picture you're trying to paint. But, you know, there's a lot of interesting things that I'd like to ask based on what you've just said. one interesting thing that I want to ask is how often is it that you find perhaps women who don't have that masculine, healthy figure to ever attach to or to currently attach to,
Mhm.
attaching to you or trying to? Perhaps for
Mm,
feelings, or
sure,
perhaps you are the only or the strongest or most prominent masculine helping, guiding figure, and you're there to help them and you're looking out for them and they feel they can
sure,
rely on you and count on you. Well, it would only be natural, I would assume, for women to often catch feelings. How does
sure,
that play out?
sure. Yeah, it's a fantastic question. It's interesting that when years ago when I started and I was single, unattached, beginning to do this work, kind of my own work in personal development, is because of my own wounded state. Those types of scenarios would take place where someone would reach out and initiate or attempt to initiate a conversation. However, as I began, here's personal responsibility, which is the cornerstone of our coaching practice. My healing journey began to such in a way, and I'm so grateful to all those who have helped me get to this point and will continue to get me there. I'm so grateful that I was such in an energetic state that I no longer attracted those who would seek out codependently a connection, or as you say, catch feels, as the kids say these days, catch the feels for me. It no longer became a prospective partner energy. It became a true, leveled, elevated, healing, fathering energy. So regardless of age difference, it doesn't matter. So I've worked with 25-year-old women. I've worked with 65-year-old women. There is now this elevated understanding, this mature connection. And that all begins with me, not them. So it begins with me establishing boundaries. I'm going to say that again. Boundaries. So I have been studying and acting, integrating boundaries for myself for over 25 years, and I'm still working on it. But it is one of our specialties, and it is a cornerstone. It is a foundation of our healing practice. If we don't have boundaries, if we don't have the capacity to say yes or no, and by the way, it's really not the capacity to say yes or no to someone. It's really how are we going to respond to their reaction? That's what we're fearful of. So if we tell somebody no that we've told yes to for years, we're establishing a relational boundary, but we're still terrified that they're going to try to bust that boundary or shame us for that boundary or not understand that boundary. That's still the work. And where does that work? Well, that's back into our original incident wounding. So for me, I work with men and women, and I establish from the jump this energy. And it's not anything that I even process or think about now. It just is. So I carry an energy that says, I am here to teach. I am here to coach. I am here to hold space for you. I am here to be a masculine energy that you find can help you. So it's very interesting. It's a powerful question. And to my knowledge, and that's all that really matters, to my knowledge, I hold space for women in our coaching practice. And there's an energy that says, this is what this is. This is a professional environment. Not only the fact that most of those women are working with my wife as well. So there's this inborn boundary that says, this is who Paige and David are. In fact, so many folks will come to us and are attracted to our branding because we are a couple enacting this in our own lives. In fact, one of the most powerful master classes that we've recently conducted was specifically and exclusively for our group coaching program for women. Was Paige and I got on a live Zoom call, invited everyone that was in this program, and we literally went through a document that highlighted highlights and lowlights of a week in the life of David and Paige. Screenshots of text messages, conflict, fights, understandings, misunderstandings, sex, intimacy, all of it. Invited them into a week with David and Paige. The response was extraordinary. They took it. In fact, one of my female clients who has been married for 30 years. Husband not doing the work. She is. And struggling through that, to your point earlier. She felt compelled enough to share the recording of that masterclass to her husband without pressure, without nagging, without, hey, babe, you need to watch this, which when a man is told to do something, he will do one of two things. He will retreat. Yeah, exactly. He will run the other way, or he will fight back. So that by the way, that's why nagging, ladies that are listening and watching, that's why nagging doesn't work. So she simply shared, which by the way, a feminine woman shares, she doesn't tell. A feminine woman shares this with her husband. Nothing was said. Then over the next couple of weeks, he began to shift. He began to use language that was shocking her. He began to serve through a leadership component, love on her, ask her, hold space for her. She sent me a text message that said this was going on, and she didn't know what to do. And on our next coaching call, Zach, I compelled her, I challenged her to ask, babe, did you watch that video? And she was terrified to ask. Of course. He lovingly said, yes. I realized that I need to change. So you never know where that's going to come from. But the reason why we feel folks are attracted to our modalities, attracted to our coaching practice, attracted to us, is because we're living and breathing it as a man, as a woman, individually, and as a married couple.
That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I want to rewind a little bit. And you were mentioning your construct that you use when you're working with women to kind of form I don't want to say imaginary, but kind of an inner other masculine figure, and a father-like energy figure. What is the relationship or role of God in either your recommendations or perhaps your observations of the women that you're working with? Because God, of course, inherently is kind of that masculine energy, overwatching and protective and guiding and teaching figure. Do you find women who have already a concept of God perhaps heal a little faster or easier in that way? Or do you find perhaps women getting closer with their construct of God when they are working with that inner masculine energy as well? What's kind of the role of God in
Yeah. Fantastic question. I'll answer it by going backwards a little bit. What often comes up in our coaching sessions and in the group coaching program that my wife leads with these women is that spiritual trauma will come forward. Their experience where God wasn't the masculine presence or presented as that. And so we spend quite a bit of time navigating that. Now, I have a background in spirituality. I went to seminary. I was a lay pastor. I know far too much or far too little about too much when it comes to spirituality. I can tell you what Passover is. I can tell you what Ramadan is. I can tell you what Buddhism is. I can tell you about all of the world religion, so to speak, and the spirituality and the woo and all of that. So I know enough to be dangerous, to tap into that. And I have some vast experience specifically in Christian scripture, both Old Testament, New Testament. In fact, what most people don't understand or don't see necessarily is that so much of the foundation of our coaching practice is rooted in deep spirituality. Now, we don't forwardly or outwardly, I guess we are now, because here we are on a podcast, but we don't forwardly or outwardly say, yes, this is what we believe and this is what you should believe. We're actually the antithesis of that. So we want to be open and welcome. We want to be curious before critical. So that said, sometimes in our coaching practice, we begin to go down a pathway in which to reestablish the masculine essence of what they truly want to be attached to, which is a godly figure. And so oftentimes folks and women will come to us with an adversarial attitude towards spirituality and God, which is completely understandable based on their trauma history. Now, all that said, we do have women who come to us and are incredibly spiritual, who are incredibly deep into their faith and look to God as the refuge. And so it is, to your point, can be an easier road to say you do have experience with healing masculine energy every Sunday when you go to church. And you are now. What's interesting about that is there can be a lot of misguidings and wounded narratives connected to someone's faith too. So just like someone would leverage marijuana use, alcohol use, busyness, spending too much time with your kids, that's right, there's that can happen. Any type of circumventing or bypassing strategy away from the pain that needs to be addressed, so can religion play that part. Where I spend 3 days at church, I'm always praying. I'm going to pray the pain away.
Yep.
This type of so church life can also be leveraged as a circumvention strategy around the pain that needs to be healed. But when folks come to us and they have an idea of something greater than themselves, which I say this to the men that I coach often, a man has to be tethered to something bigger than himself in order for him to truly heal. Now, whatever that is, whatever that choice is, there has to be something. It could be a philosophy. It could be God. It could be Allah. It could whatever. But something that they're putting their trust and faith in something bigger than themselves. Because if they're not, then they are, to quote some scripture from the Christian tradition, then they are building their house on sand and not on rock. Yeah. So it is a big deal. It's absolutely a big deal. It can provide a more effective and efficient pathway to their healing.
Again, beautifully put. Well said. I think there's a lot of escapism in very religious communities and individuals. And I think it's an easy way out of actually doing work to just dive into external study. Because ultimately, the closer you get to God, the more you realize it is internal, and we have to heal our internal to actually be closer to God. Doesn't matter how much reading you do. Doesn't matter how much time you spend in a holy, facility or reading a holy book. It's there is no escaping the hard work that it is to heal. And unfortunately, I think that ends up giving all the religions a bad rap when there's people that do that. They kind of use it as a crutch, as an escape avenue and pathway. And that's what kind of turns some people off from religion, not necessarily their own negative experiences, but observing, like, oh, you're this like devout, this, that, the other.
Yeah.
But you could clearly see that they got a whole bunch of stuff messed up in them and they're just ignoring it because, this psalm or this scripture, and it's, it's a disservice to the religions itself. But another point that you just raised at the end there, what was the final thing you said? What was the very last thing?
I'm glad we're recording this, brother. It came out and it's gone. So it's okay. It's all right.
Doesn't matter. I'll maybe think of it later, but let's switch gears a little bit. Mm-hmm. We've talked about what women can do perhaps as first steps or modalities to kind of heal. Let's address the men now. What is a man's pathway to going from a wounded feminine internal side, because that's who you work with, to healing that? And then how do you kind of walk men through that?
Yeah. So in so much of our branding, so much of our marketing, Zach, what we say is, and this is truth, it's another foundational construct of our coaching practice. We help men find purpose and help women feel peace. Now, those word choices are very specific. We help men find, that's masculine, that's a masculine word. Purpose, that's masculine. Feel, feminine. Peace, feminine. Now, it doesn't mean that men don't want peace, because Lord knows, brother. Don't we want peace? What we've come to understand is that men who have purpose and are leveraging the ways in which to find that purpose in all facets of life. That is their primary pathway to healing. Our director of operations, she brought this to me several months ago. Really a brilliant individual. We're so blessed to have her on the team. She said, a bored man is a dangerous man. Now, bored doesn't mean, oh, I don't have anything to do, so I'm going to play a video game. Not necessarily. What it means is he lacks purpose. He lacks drive. He lacks direction. He lacks projection into his future. He doesn't understand who he is. So if he doesn't understand who he is, he cannot move forward. Which, by the way, a man who is in his purpose and knows where he's going and continuing that healing journey is absolute catnip to his wife. It is a primary way in which a woman will say, I will follow him all day long. So we help men first begin to identify who they are by what they like to do. What are they good at? And what does the world need? So we ask them those three questions. This is one of the exercises we take everyone through, but primarily men, because we want to identify, what are you really good at? And sometimes men will say, I don't know. I don't know what I'm good at. Well, we can begin there. But typically they know some of the things that they're good at. And it could be mowing the lawn. I'm really good at it. My lines are straight. I'm really good at crafting a good cup of coffee. Okay, fantastic. What do you love to do? Oh, well, I love to play baseball. I love to take my wife out. I love to whatever the case may be. And then we ask them this really powerful, more esoteric question. What does the world need? What do people need? And we really begin to hone down to what they believe the world needs. So when we harness answers to all three of those questions, it begins to carve and sharpen their idea of purpose. And ultimately, if I were to wave my magic wand, Zach, I want every man to monetize his purpose. So that's what I've done. I'm so blessed to do is that I've discovered my purpose is to bring healing to the world through a coaching modality. That's my purpose, without question, unequivocally, no mistakes. That's how sure I am. Now, how we're going to get there and who we continue to work with and how our message expands, that's all the variance. That's all the feminine energy. But I know precisely where I'm going. I know precisely who I am. Doesn't mean that I don't second guess and fall into the fears of my wounds and I still need to figure out my codependency and my people pleasing and my insecurities. But it absolutely means I have discovered my purpose. Why? Evidence, certainly on those that we've worked with, and what it feels like when I get onto a coaching call, during the coaching call, and after the coaching call. I don't want to be anywhere else from a professional and purpose-driven space. I turned my purpose into a profession. That's why, by the way, I have to establish boundaries within my own self because, Zach, I will work all the damn time because I love it. I have to force myself at times to pick up a fiction book rather than read another book about trauma because I'm consistently looking for ways to improve me so I can help others to improve their lives as well. That's what I want for every single man on the planet, is to monetize their purpose. So if it's building tiny houses, they love it. It's their purpose. Well, let's find a way to monetize it. We have moved into a space of time where those things are absolutely possible. So the traditional or historic ways of moving through life and earning money, we've expanded that. We no longer have to go to college. We no longer have to go to trade school. We no longer have to get certified in 3 different multifaceted lettered behind our names. We can tap into our inner healing and find the purpose and then monetize that. Build a kingdom that is serving the world and also serving our purpose, to where we find that directive, where we find that power and that strength and that satisfaction that every single man is seeking.
God, David, I'm so happy to have connected with you, man. That's profoundly beautiful and well said, and wholeheartedly agreed, you know? And what is amazing is, look at that. We surrendered to the moment before and said, let's move on from that point that I forgot. And your response was addressing exactly what I was about to ask anyway, because what I was going to ask or expand upon was what you mentioned previously in how we need to be connected to something bigger than ourselves. How it's absolutely essential. And what you went into is essentially that. Because when we are connected to something bigger than ourselves, that helps us find purpose, and that helps us want to serve the world. When we feel a sense of owing God or owing the world or the universe or our community or even our family, our ancestry, our lineage, when we owe it to our last name even to be great, only then can we really fulfill that and seek it. And that gives us the strength in those times of weakness that are sure to come. But it's such an essential part. And I'm glad that you kind of incorporate that, or definitely do incorporate that in your teachings, especially for men, because we need to be connected to something above us. And the most pure form of that is God, whatever God means to you in your language, in your religion, whatever. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There's the old saying, idle hands are the devil's playthings. And it's so true. A man sitting around and doing nothing or watching TV is not a fulfilled man. And so that man can only seek hedonism and dopamine and other artificial means of existing, because the alternative is feeling empty. And when you feel empty, you have that anxiousness, you have that void. We have to be doing something. We have to be moving. Our hearts have to be pumping, otherwise we're dead. Our minds have to be doing something, otherwise we're brain dead. So when we're not taking that energy that we've been blessed by God with and applying it in a wholesome and constructive direction, perhaps because we don't want to do the work and we're lazy, but also perhaps because we just genuinely don't know where to apply that energy and feel lost.
Yep.
That's when the vices take over. That's when the laziness and addictions and this, that, the other kind of take over. And of course, there's always nuance. There's this trauma that kind of, play into certain behaviors, and our environment can introduce certain behaviors, etc. But perhaps to your point, what you would say in that is that our energies and how we exist are attracting that environment and external influences towards us anyway. So it still comes back on you to do the work and attract better environments, which I wholeheartedly agree with. It's a great point as well that an end goal in 2024 should be monetizing your purpose, finding a purpose and monetizing it, because there's all this glamorization these days of a disconnect from money, and no, money doesn't matter, and no, do follow your heart and follow your passion. And one, it's absolute bollocks. Money does matter. What do you need food to put in your mouth, and that costs money. Money can then also allow you to further pursue and amplify your passion and your mission when you find it. It can allow you to care for your family better. It can allow you to care for your community better. It can allow you to be a stronger force for good in this battle of good versus evil. So why would we not acquire it, right? And it's all this psyop conflation of money and evil to keep people that are seeking truth and seeking goodness poor, so they can't actually have an impact in the world. That's the problem, right? You have this conflation of, the healed person isn't a hustler or an entrepreneur or a go-getter. hippie in the fields beating drums and growing their hair out and this and that. Like, I get it. I get why people like dichotomies.
Mm-hmm.
People like dichotomies because it's easy to comprehend. You can have this or you can have that. But it's time to break that mold. And a lot of people are comprehending that that isn't the way that reality really works, that you can monetize a true and meaningful and enjoyable activity or thing that you do or product that you create or service that you offer or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that will allow you to only amplify your existence and those around you and then the community or world at large as much as you'd like to and as much as you achieve the ability to do. That doesn't happen through sitting around and not monetizing your passion and your vision or at least your purpose. It all can go in hand, but it takes work not only to find and calibrate yourself to ever figure out what that might be or what that might be right now, and that might change along the way as you grow and as you experience the years.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also work to continue along that path and then make it happen. And then so you got to prepare yourself, which is work. Then you have to walk that path, which is work. Perhaps you have to walk off of the path that you've been going down, which itself is work to break off that path. But on the other side of that hard work is, I think, the best existence for a man and the
Mm-hmm.
most fulfilling relationships with women and the best and strongest capacity to raise healthy and wonderful and loving children
Mm-hmm.
and to really make an impact in this world as a man.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Well said, brother. Well said.
Yeah. That wasn't particularly a question, but if that makes you think of anything that you'd like to interject with, by all means, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. We men come from a place of scarcity. We come from a place that says there's only so much money out there. There's only so much opportunity that if we make money, this is coming from a passive system. If we make money, we're somehow taking it away from somebody else. When in reality, the more money we can make, the more we pour back into an infrastructure of healing. That's how we look at it. So we have to identify what our value is as men. And boy, that is what I help men do every day, is understand what their value is, because they have wounds that say their value is less than what they want it to be. So much of that passivity and people pleasing and addicted to love and, codependency and oversharing and all of these wounded feminine energies is counterintuitive to the power and strength to move a man forward, to pursue, to be challenged. And part of that is the provision aspect. It's not just money, but providing for himself first. And then that inner, that flame, that burn that goes inside of a man that says, I want to give. The masculine energy gives, the feminine energy receives. And we have seen so much of that reversal, so much of that misalignment, which we were describing earlier. But a man is supposed to give his purpose, give his opinion, give his mind, give his body, give and give and give and give to the world. And there is value in that giving. There is absolutely value in that giving. And that value is often attached to a monetary aspect. Of course it is. But the more that we can exchange our financial provision, the more that we can have impact, the more that we can bring healing. That's our position in our coaching practice. Is if individuals aren't in a space financially to engage in our coaching practice, that's okay. That's okay. They're not in that space. Now, we have had peers who have done other things, who have lowered their pricing, who have had discounts, who have made concessions. And all that does is devalue the purpose. It devalues the purpose. So it's important to know never to feel the shame of wanting to earn what you are worth. That's a whole nother conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in the charity organization I run, part of what we do is train holistic cancer coaches who then go out as entrepreneurs. And so that's a conversation I have with them all the time because, as holistic healers, a common thing is I want to help the world and make it as affordable and cheap as possible. Well, then
Right.
that's a whole rabbit hole of attracting chaos and low value customers itself. Anyway, do you think that there's men and women out there that are so far wounded that they cannot heal? Not that they will not, but that they cannot?
Absolutely not. It's the reason why I get up. Truly. It's the reason why I get off my pillow every day. It's the reason why I put my head on the pillow at night and say, good and faithful servant. I believe every single soul on the planet has the capacity and has the opportunity to heal. Now, how they're exposed to those healing strategies and modalities and opportunities, that's why we continue to expand our message. So no one is too far gone. And I receive a lot of that feedback from folks that are scrolling on social media and find us out there and give me a list of all the reasons why they can't heal.
Yeah.
I have this and I have 12 kids and I have this and I this and that and I've got financial struggles and I have this and I live in Wyoming, with all due respect to all those Wyomans, or not sure what you call yourselves, but nonetheless, those are wounded responses. That's all they are. They're wounded responses. We often refer to them as excuses, but they are. Those are wounded responses that say, I'm too far gone. There's no such thing, because I could have made that claim. And believe me, I was in some spaces of deep, deep, deep wounding, deep depression through much of my adult life, thinking I'm too far gone. I'm cursed. The reason why I'm in this space, this is what I would tell myself, Zach. The reason why I'm in this space of dysregulation and hurt and pain and bitterness and resentment is because God took my mom. And I feasted on that narrative for years. Blame shifting. I'm cursed. No one can really help me. Poor me. No one can help me. I'm too far gone. The reality and the blessing of really identifying with and having folks reach out to me to extend a hand has been the reason why I now am in this space to help others. But I get it. I understand. I've been in those dark recesses where it feels like the whole world's crashing in and there's really no hope. So we are always providing, and we are challenging that narrative too, because often someone who comes to the table with this with this pity mentality, they have been coddled. They have energetically connected to other individuals who are in a space of poor me, in a space of woundedness. And it's woundedness. They're not a bad person. It's just wounding. Believe me, I've been there. What we do is we find a beautiful juxtaposition between empathy and challenge. I can understand why you feel that way. I get it. I've been where you are. And it's time for you to make a decision to move forward. We are here to help, and we can provide that support and that direction and that strength. But you have to take the first step. And if people latch on to that narrative, then we can certainly provide that support.
Do you really think that God takes our loved ones away when they die? Or does our, as humans, free will choices culminate in things happening and playing out the way they do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a good question. How much time you got, Zach? Because I think we just opened a wormhole into spirituality, right? So my personal belief in my faith says that God has allowed us the opportunity to be personally responsible. That's, again, the cornerstone of our coaching practice. It says you're the only one that can choose your path forward. No one keeps you from healing. No one keeps you in that marriage. No one keeps you in that financial distress. No one. No one has done that to you. No one triggers you. You're triggered, but nobody triggers you. Important aspect. So I believe that an all powerful, all loving God allows us to have free will. So is he omnipresent? Is he omniscient? Does he know all? Of course he does. But he has a much broader perspective on the world that he created than I do. So now I can, through my healing journey, Zach, I can now look at the death of my mother as a gift. As a gift. And I also, my belief is that she is right here with me, acknowledging, loving, witnessing everything that has happened in my life, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And she is here giving me a little wink and saying, "You're doing good, kid." So her lack of presence in my life is significant. And I could choose to either take that significance and make it dark, or I can make it light. I choose to make it light.
What does the name David mean to you?
I hear the name David. It's interesting that you asked this because in our coaching practice, in our professional life, we are incredibly precise about names. Your name is your name. It's the only thing. It's the only thing you got. Now, are there other Davids on the planet? Of course there are. Are there other Davids in history that are Of course there are. So I know that I was named after the David from Scripture. But when I hear my name, when I hear somebody say my name, it feels like a powerful thumbprint that only belongs to me. When I hear other people's names that are David, it's different. When I hear my name, it's almost like you're saying a different name. It is incredibly unique, it's incredibly specific, and it's only mine. And so, by the way, I decide that I'm David, definitively, never Dave. And with all due respect to all the Daves out there, that's great, but it's not my name. It's not my name. That's why you and I had this conversation before we got on to the recording and said, "So how do you say your name?" It's really important. My last name is Lee. It's spelled Lea. So often it's mispronounced Leah. But my name, David Lea, carries an incredible amount of weight to me, and only me. So it is the only thing that is absolutely unequivocally mine. And I want to honor what has been bestowed to me by my father and mother, who decided, hey, let's call him David. Great. That is me. It's definitively me. It is powerful. It is strong. It is devoted. It is flawed. It is wounded. But it's definitively me without question.
Does the name David or David Lea have etymological meaning that you've explored, or even like historical significance, like the messenger, the prophetic figure David was this way, or like the actual syllables mean something in the language?
I have not done that. It's an interesting, and I'm a huge research nerd. so when I was a kid, Zach, we had no internet. We had no Google. And so little David Lea, would be in front of the television watching something, and he would run to the Encyclopedia Britannica and grab whatever volume was matching something that he was curious, and he'd go grab it off. This is me I'm talking about. And I would open that thing up on the floor, and I would read about, I want to learn more about what that guy just said. I was that kid that read the dictionary because I wanted to know language. So you have challenged me to, I wonder what that means. What does Lee mean? It's an English word. We have some English ancestry. The Lee side of the mountain, actually, the Lee side of the hill. But as far as anything else, nope. That's as far as it goes.
Interesting.
Oh.
You raised a point that I raised my eyebrows out a bit or a little while ago now, in talking about a man's devotion to a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And you tied it inherently with exclusivity to a singular woman.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an interesting point to raise because I think men and women are very different. And I think devotion can look very different from man to woman and from woman to man. And perhaps exclusivity isn't necessarily inherently tied for a man to be devoted to a woman. And I think that there's cultures that exist that demonstrate this very successfully, where perhaps there is a man and he has several women. He loves and cares for and honors each of them. And it's a wonderful, harmonious kind of existence. These kind of things can look different in different capacities. Perhaps they're all in one household, perhaps there's different households, but I'm interested to explore what you think of the concept of polygyny is the name of it, but
Sure.
men having separate or different or multiple partners.
Yeah. So it's a fantastic question. So if I go back to what we deem or what I deem as the rock is the foundation, then look at the empirical data that supports it. Empirical data, research, data, whatever the case may be, is when I see a man who is distracted with anything, squirrel, you know, oh, when he is distracted, when he lacks focus, when he lacks precision, that is what we refer to as a man who lacks purpose. So whether it's a woman or women, whether it's video games, whether it's marijuana, whether it's alcohol, whether it's busyness, whether it's climbing the corporate ladder, those all can serve, from our perspective, as a distraction. We believe that there is singular focus. Now, it doesn't mean that when a man is growing a business that he needs to pay attention to multiple facets of the business. But ideally, he's only focused on one. And that's his focus. He finds individuals who can fulfill or who are much smarter in those capacities of his business ventures that can do those jobs better. So his singular focus is on this. For example, me in my business, I'm the CEO. I am increasingly working hard to find who's to do the what's rather than me. So I am moving into a space where I'm releasing 80% of what I do during the day, 80%, and only focus on 20%. Now, what's that 20%? 20% includes what you and I are doing right now. Having conversations, networking, growing, expanding, coaching, sharpening, creating content. The very essence of what we're bringing to the world. I am the primary masculine penetrator that gets out into the world and says, this is what we are doing. This is how we help men, women, and couples. That is my singular focus. So if I then am going to exchange that for something else in my life, which is perhaps multiple women, from our perspective, I cannot be focused by splitting that focus. Something's going to degrade.
I respect that. Yeah, yep. I respect that. And I think it's essentially probably the most common iteration, at least within our Western world, that when a man is, specifically to use the word chasing or even juggling or having, these are all kind of flaky words themselves, multiple women, that man is usually not focusing on fulfilling himself as a man. You're not necessarily outlawing or demonizing the concept, but in common practice, it probably or perhaps usually or often doesn't work and isn't really a man operating in alignment. Is that kind of
Absolutely.
Fair
Yeah.
enough.
So if I believe that my devotion unto my wife is aligned with my devotion unto my purpose, it's all aligned. My devotion. Now it's interesting. I have 3 children. So how does that work? I am devoted to lots of people, but I'm devoted to them specifically. But I'm not distracted by the boundaries that I set. An important concept in our boundaries work with clients is that we have to understand who comes first. So, who comes first in life? This is what we ask. Most people, when they first come to us, they're like, well, my wife, my husband, my children, my family,
Wrong.
etc. Exactly. Exactly. So, when we are devoted toward ourselves first, we can then pour from a full cup rather than an empty one. So my devotion first comes to me. I choose me. Paige doesn't come first. My wife does not come first. And she feels the same. In fact, that's why I choose her every day, is because she chooses herself first, which is so counterintuitive to so much of romance and Hallmark cards and rom-coms and, oh, he completes me. That's called codependency, Tom Cruise. Right? It sure sounded good when he said it in Jerry Maguire, but it's woundedness. So my devotion, my precision is for me first, then my wife, then my children, then my business. So I'm singularly focused. I know precisely who I'm focused on right now. Right now, it's you. I am singularly focused on you in this conversation. I have all kinds of things going on around me right now that could distract me from being fully present with you. Why do I want to be fully present with you? Because I want to be fully present with me. I want that for me. That's devotion. And then you're next. So if I'm fully present with me, if I'm fully engaged, eye contact, I'm listening to every word that you say. So then I can intelligently answer your questions. So we can intelligently dialogue. But if I'm distracted by other things that are going on around me, it is a disservice first to me and then to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We can only pour in effectively one bucket at a time. And I think we need to be aware of how much we have the capacity to pour and only take on as many buckets as we truly have the capacity to properly fill and attend to. Now we have about 2 minutes here. I would love to know how someone who loved what you've had to say and loved how you've said it could look into you more. Your content, avenues. Are you on socials making content? Your website, who can or should come to you and how can they get more of you?
Absolutely. Thank you, Zach, for that. So it's funny you said that. I'm going to talk about a callback. I'm going to revert back to the beginning of our conversation when I said, hey, people who don't want to follow me, people who aren't educated or not interested in us, please come and find us anyway. Who knows? But those who may align and want to know more, our website is daring-deeply.com. There's a dash. Make sure you put the dash because I don't know where Daring Deeply is going to send you. That's out of my hands. But it's daring-deeply.com. You can find out all about our programs and one-on-one coaching and further resources. We are incredibly prominent on TikTok. And you can find me there. Just search David Lea or Daring Deeply. That's the name of our coaching practice, Daring Deeply. You can find my wife. Her name is Paige Lea. Again, our last name is Lea. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We have a prominent YouTube channel where you will find lots of complimentary content. And if you're prepared, perhaps, to dig into your own healing journey through our work, you can find our primary step or toe into the water, which is for women, a feminine energy and healing assessment. Or for men, it's called the masculine healing and energy assessment. And you can download that and answer those questions, and you will have an opportunity to get on a 30-minute live Zoom call with either Paige or myself. and we can review your answers and begin to help you identify those original wounds and begin to set a course for your specific healing journey moving forward. So
beautiful.
That's how to find us. Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly going to keep that in mind for individuals I come across on my day-to-day basis who could certainly make use of that. I love everything that you've had to say today. I love the way you've said it. I've certainly not been shy about that. I think you are a fantastic individual, and I certainly thank you for the work that you're doing for the world, because I think you are a wonderful example of this kind of work. You know, there's plenty of people out there, like we said at the beginning, giving out advice, but you know, there's very few that I would wholeheartedly recommend perhaps someone pay mind to, at least in reflection of their own self. And so in all of the things that we've said today, there's been so many take-home messages. Mm-hmm. If there's a specific one that you'd really like for an audience member to take away with them, that'd be.
Yeah. You are worthy. You are absolutely worthy. I've identified why you feel like you're not worthy. You are a unique, specific, beautiful, powerful individual that has the opportunity to live the life that you've dreamed of. It's not a dream. It's not a hope. It's not a wish. That you are absolutely worthy of having everything that you want. I promise you that. So the narrative that says, oh, you can't have everything you want is false. You can. You can have everything that you want when you begin to heal the wounds that are telling you can't.
Beautiful message. David, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Zach. It was a pleasure.
A big thank you goes out to David for coming on the show. Your relationships are such a fascinating thing to discuss because getting them right is prerequisited by a few different things. Firstly, understanding ourselves, and that has many subcategories and a lot of ways that can go wrong, a lot of blind spots, a lot of false paths, a lot of confusion. Understanding ourselves as either men or women, whichever we are, and then understanding our counterpart, everything that's gone on in their history that's made them the way that they currently are, and then understanding their gender as a whole. And we live in inverted times where, like we were discussing, men very much aren't men anymore, and women very much aren't women anymore. It's very sad. And so there's a lot going on. There's a lot of confusion, a lot of false paths, a lot of things to study and comprehend to ever get a relationship right and experience a loving, satisfying, fulfilling, healthy, and harmonious relationship. But when we do get that right, it's amongst, if not the most beautiful thing in the world. And that's how humanity keeps going. So, very important work that he's doing. I love every way in which he's doing the work that he is doing. So, again, big thanks to him for being a part of the show and for doing what he's doing for the world. It's fantastic. Be sure to check out his content, his website. Links are in the description below. As always, you can check out ZachTheHealthKing.com to see everything that I'm up to. As always, please let us know what you thought in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to the channel wherever you're listening. This way you get notified as soon as I post a new episode. Plenty more coming your way. Really hope you're enjoying these as much as I'm enjoying making them for you. You're listening to the Health King's Court. Ancient wisdom, modern health.